Hello everyone and welcome back to We Sometimes Talk About Thrillers on Thursdays. Today is a very exciting video for two reasons. Number one, Weapons has been my most anticipated horror movie of the year because Barbarian is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. So I'm so excited to do a review of that. And the reason I'm having plus announcement in the title is because the first couple minutes of this video, I will have timestamps down below. I'm going to be announcing this year's picks for our Halloween horror reads of 2025 in our Discord group. So if you're clicking this video and you've never seen my channel before and you just want the Weapons review, please feel free to use the timestamps, but considering this part on the book club will only take 2 minutes, I didn't want to do an entire separate video just on this. So again, the first part, we're going to talk about the horror book club picks and what all of that is. Then I'm going to have a spoiler-free Weapons review, and then the last few minutes we'll be discussing Weapons with spoilers. So again, timestamps below, since I'm sure some of you maybe don't care about the book club and some of you really don't want to be spoiled about Weapons. So first up for the 2025 Halloween book club, I think many of you are familiar with this, but just in case you're not, down below you are always welcome to click the link. I have an ongoing Discord group that's about all things horror. There are different categories if you want to just chat about horror books, horror movies, TV shows, all that good stuff. And then just around Halloween of each year, typically in August or September, we vote on which Halloween books we want to read for the year. So I have picked 10 books. You can vote in the book poll section. You can vote for as many as you'd like. If you want to vote for 8 out of the 10, feel free, 9 out of the 10, whatever you want to do. And all you have to do is tap the corresponding pumpkin. This is going to be open for about a week, and then on August 21st, the voting will close. And on the evening of Friday, August 22nd, the book kind of channel areas where you can discuss the books will go live. The thing I would say is if you're unfamiliar with Discord, please reference the information and rules section. And also feel free to check out the previous kind of tabs so you can see how it works. But you just basically want to make sure that you're not discussing a spoiler about a later chapter and discussing it in the wrong chapters section, if that makes sense. But the 10 book choices are going to be Buffalo Hunter Hunter, Slewfoot, Wake Up and Open Your Eyes, Something in the Walls, The Reformatory, When the Wolf Comes Home, Diavola, We Used to Live Here, The Staircase in the Woods, and Blood on Her Tongue. The top 2 with the most pumpkin votes will be our book club picks for 2025. But again, happy voting, and let's go ahead and get into the Weapons review. So this section is going to again be spoiler free, and I'll make sure to give a big warning in case you step away from your computer before we get into the spoiler section. I would also say to be wary of going into the comment section because I can't control what other people comment, and I'm not sitting at my computer 24/7 to delete comments. So I would not go into the comment section if you are worried about in case other people aside from me post spoilers there. So as I mentioned, Barbarian is my most, I would say, not favorite horror movie of all time, but I would say it's in my top 5, and it's easily what I would say is my most rewatched horror movie. It's the one that I love to show friends. I'm not a big movie rewatcher, but something about Barbarian I really, really, really love. So because of that, Weapons was the horror movie, or just movie in general that I was most excited about this year. So again, no spoilers, but I will just read kind of the rough tagline about what this is about. So when all but one child from the same classroom mysteriously vanish on the same night, at exactly the same time, a community is left questioning who or what is behind their disappearance. And so there's a lot of different characters in this movie, lots of interesting perspectives. But the one thing I will say, and again, this is not a spoiler because you can tell from the trailer, Julia Garner is the teacher of that classroom. I'm going to get into some pros and cons, and then I will give my rating, and then we will get into the spoilers. So for the things I loved, I adored all of the different perspectives. I won't get into detail on who any of the other characters are because again, I think it's a fun movie to go into blind. But that style of Barbarian with the different perspectives is one of the things I loved the most. So I was happy to see that in Weapons as well. I also think each of the characters is maybe a little bit different than you would anticipate. Again, some I won't give away what I mean by that, but I found each character's perspective, I would say, honestly, equally interesting, and the acting across the board was wonderful. Also similar to Barbarian, it has that incredible balance of horror and humor. Barbarian had some humor. I would say that Weapons, and this was a surprise to me, is even funnier. Now, some people might view that as a con, and I'll get into that. But there are so many scenes where 1 minute, I was literally jumping out of my seat from a really well done scare. And then 2 seconds later, I'm laughing. And I don't think, I've of course experienced horror comedies before, but this really handles true scares and dread and fall out of your seat laughing really, really well. I love movies, for example, like Ready or Not. That's a classic horror comedy. I adore it. I love Samara Weaving, but I wouldn't say that I was ever actually scared. You know, it was a horror movie that had scary things and gore and had some humor. Weapons is different in that. And if other people have other movies, they would maybe compare it to when I'm saying this, feel free to share down below. But again, it's not a horror comedy. It's a really scary horror movie that also has a lot of comedy in it. And I'm having maybe a little hard time explaining the distinction, but maybe some of you have seen it and will understand what I'm getting at. I know in the horror community, there's a big disdain for jump scares, and I don't understand why. Jump scares can be terrifying when they're done really well. And there, I would say, are 2 or 3 in this movie, especially 2 that come to mind, that really, really got me, where the entire theater jumped. My heart was racing. My boyfriend who was sitting next to me rarely gets scared, and he also was jumping out of his seat. One other thing, and again, I don't think this is giving anything away, that, you know, even though it's a movie about children that go missing, it's not like every other thriller and horror movie where most of the point of view would be of parents of the missing kids. You do see a lot of perspectives in the community. Some of it is from the perspective of parents and, you know, their anger about their children going missing, but it's not the focal point of the movie. And I saw some feedback online where people were upset about that, but my argument would be we have so many thrillers and horror movies where 100% of the point of view is about the parents of the missing kids. So I actually really appreciated that it was not the case for this one. I will also say that, you know, I'll get into the ending a little bit more when we talk about spoilers, but I will say, at least in terms of the setup of this movie was really incredible. I had absolutely, until you find out what's going on, I had absolutely zero idea what was going on. And I don't think there's any way within the first 30 minutes or so anyone would be able to guess. So I've talked about pros, now we're gonna go ahead and into cons. And again, there won't be any spoilers for this section. So for cons, I mentioned this movie is very, very funny. I didn't know whether to put this piece in a pro or a con, so I'm just putting it in the con section, even though it's not really a con. I guess the one thing I would say is a lot of the humor is towards the last. I mean, there's funny moments throughout, but a lot of the humor is toward the very end. And again, it's not a negative, but I just will, because again, I was laughing incredibly hard. But what I will say is, you know, you go into it expecting it. This was my most anticipated horror movie of the year. So the fact that, like, during the last section, I wasn't scared at all, I don't know. I kind of have a little bit of mixed maybe feelings about that. And this is such a tiny critique and it's such a little nitpick. And again, I'm not gonna give anything away when I say this. The last, like, literal line of the horror movie, I thought fell a little bit flat, and I don't know if it was supposed to have a big impact, but it just felt a little bit flat for me. But in the end, I really, really loved Weapons. And the last thing I will say before we get into spoilers is that if you have the chance to go see this in theaters, I highly recommend it, because it's such a fun theater experience. Seeing people go from screaming to laughing within the span of seconds. I saw people who went to see the movie completely alone. It's the kind of movie you kind of want to start talking about with the people next to you, and it was fun. I saw there were a lot of people who went to this alone, and they were kind of getting together and talking afterwards. It's just a fun theater experience, so I highly recommend going in person if you're able to and have the chance. But so in the end, I would give Weapons 4.5 out of 5 creepy candles. Okay, again, if you stepped away from your computer, we're getting into spoilers now. So just a few comments, or just sort of reactions. I have never seen audience reactions like they did in Weapons, and maybe it's, you know, a recency effect, but what is his name? When James finds the kids, the audience's intake of breath, seeing them all standing in the basement. Also, when the mother gets into the back of the car, when you think she's just walked past, again, that intake of breath, he was really controlling how I felt, meaning the director, how each of us felt, which I thought was really, really interesting. And I don't know, I go a little back and forth with this. Part of me wishes that one of the perspectives had been Gladys. I'm not someone who needs to understand every little thing about what's going on in a horror movie. I understand that she was a witch, even though Justine was being called a witch. You know, Gladys is the real witch. And I know that we don't need a huge amount of answers beyond that, but part of me did still just want a little bit more. This also is not a spoiler per se, but I think the discussion around it has been really interesting because with, the assault rifle over top of the house and the children going missing, there's been a lot of parallels and discussions to school shootings, but then I've also seen a lot of people kind of shooting down discussions like that, saying, well, the director said it's not about that. But I saw someone say this online, and they were basically saying movies are public art. And so we're also able to interpret it in the way we would like, even if it's not what the director has said. I know I was reading an interview with Zach Cregger, and he was saying it was partially based on the loss of one of his friends, which many people are speculating is probably Trevor Moore, given that it came out on the anniversary of his death. And then Zach Cregger also said that that idea of coming home and your parents being very different, the little boy was rooted in some of his own and his family's experiences with alcoholism, which I thought was interesting. And you know what, my perspective would be, even though Zach Cregger has said it's not about mass shootings in schools, I think it's fine for us to interpret it that way if we would like, because we're the audience and that's part of what going to the movies is. And I think it's fine to do that, especially considering I think that is an important discussion to be had. So those are all my thoughts on Weapons. I hope you all enjoyed it if you saw it, but I have seen some mixed thoughts on it online, so be curious to hear your perspective down below if you'd like to share. But again, I hope you all are doing well and staying safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.